Sponsored by Rabbi Shlomi and Mirla Greenwald. This is a Sicha from Likutei Sichos, Chelek Parshas Haazinu Sicha Alef, and it's also connected to Shabbos Teshuva. And the topic of the Sicha is that in this week's Parsha we learn the pasuk of Haazinu Hashemayim Gemer V'Sishma Haaretz, and we learn a teaching of the Sifri on this pasuk. And there are 5 parts in the Sicha. The Rebbe will, number 1, present that this teaching must have a Haira in it, like all teachings in the Torah. Number 2, ask 2 questions about this teaching. One of the questions is how this Haira can be for every Yid, and the other question is how it's connected to the time Parshas Haazinu is often read, which is on Shabbos Teshuva. Number 3, present a side discussion and ask a question on it. Number 4, present another side discussion, and based on that, answer the question that was on the first side discussion. And number 5, based on all of this, answer the original 2 questions. On the pasuk at the very beginning of our parsha of Haazinu Hashemayim Gemer V'Sishma Haaretz, so it says in Sifri, Lefi Shehaya Moshe Karev L'Shamayim, because Moshe was close to the Shamayim, Lefichach Amar Haazinu Hashemayim. That's why he said Haazinu Hashemayim, which reflects that it's something which he is close to. Ulefi Shehaya Rachik Min Haaretz, and because Moshe was far, he was distant from the Haaretz, Lefichach Amar V'Sishma Haaretz. Therefore he said V'Sishma Haaretz, which reflects that he is far from it. So Haazinu reflects that the person is close to the thing, and V'Sishma reflects that the person is distant from the thing. And we're going to begin by presenting something which will lead into a question, and that is, it's understood that just like in all matters of the Torah, there is a Haira to each and every Yid, so too in regard to what the Sifri tells us, Shehaya Moshe Karev L'Shamayim, there is a Haira in this to each and every Yid. And the explanation is that since, as it says in Tanya, that in Kol Nefesh V'Nefesh Mi Beis Yisrael, in each and every Nefesh of a Yid, Yesh Ba Mebchinas Moshe Rabbeinu Olav Shalom, there is an element of Moshe Rabbeinu. Ki hu Meshiva Roim Chulu, because he's one of the 7 Roim, and more importantly, or even more so, he's also Klalus Kulam, in a way even more than the other Roim. So therefore every Yid can at least reach to Efes Katseyu V'Shemetz Mineyu, to the levels of Moshe that the Torah tells us about. Anything that the Torah tells us about Moshe Rabbeinu, every single Yid is able to have some sort of connection, some sort of achievement of those levels. And in our case, it's to be Karev L'Shamayim, because the Torah tells us that Moshe was Karev L'Shamayim. Obviously, it's something which each and every Yid is capable of reaching to some extent, at least Efes Katseyu V'Shemetz Mineyu. And since a person is able to reach this, so it's understood that a person is obligated to work on this, since Avodas HaAdam must be Keman Debay L'Meved. A person has to do everything that they are capable of doing. So it means that this is an obligation on each and every person to have some level of this aspect that Moshe Rabbeinu had of being Karev L'Shamayim. There are 2 questions here. The first question is, how is it in the ability of each and every Yid to be Karev L'Shamayim, and even more so, that each and every one is obligated to do this? How is that something which is in the ability of each and every Yid to be Karev L'Shamayim? And the second question is, we spoke many times that the content of the Parsha, the Teichen of the Parsha, is connected to the time that we read the Parsha. So from this it's understood that this Haira, to be Karev L'Shamayim, is especially connected to the time that we read Parshas Haazinu in, which in many years, like this year, we read it in the Aseres Yemei Teshuva on Shabbos Teshuva. And so the question is, how is this Haira, to be Karev L'Shamayim, connected to the Aseres Yemei Teshuva, and specifically to Shabbos Teshuva? This will be understood by first explaining that the Shabbos between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim is called Shabbos Teshuva. And according to what's known that the name of everything reflects what the thing is, so it's understood that the idea of this Shabbos is Teshuva, because it's called Shabbos Teshuva. And even though on a simple level it's called Shabbos Teshuva only because it's one of the days of Aseres Yemei Teshuva, and So since it's one of the days of Aseret Tshuva and it's Shabbos, therefore it's called Shabbos Tshuva. But nevertheless, since every aspect of Torah is precise, so since they call this Shabbos with the name Shabbos Tshuva, it's understood that its connection to Tshuva isn't just because it's one of the days of Aseret Tshuva, but rather also because of it being Shabbos. It's called Shabbos Tshuva. That means its connection to Tshuva is because of it being Shabbos, and not just because it's one of the Aseret Tshuva. Meaning that since it's the Shabbos of Aseret Tshuva, therefore it has a special quality of Tshuva over the other Aseret Tshuva. So since they call the name of this day Shabbos Tshuva, it indicates and reflects that it's connected to Tshuva because of it being Shabbos, and not just because it's one of the Aseret Tshuva. Continuing with this point, and even according to the opinion that it's called Shabbos Shuva and not Shabbos Tshuva, which it's called Shabbos Shuva, that's seemingly because of the Haftarah, which starts with the words Shuva Yisrael. But from this itself, that they established that the Haftarah should be Shuva Yisrael, which talks about Shuva, so it's understood that this Shabbos has a special connection to Tshuva. So even according to that opinion, that it's called Shabbos Shuva and not Shabbos Tshuva, and it's called Shabbos Shuva because of the Haftarah, which starts with the words Shuva Yisrael, but still the Haftarah talks about Tshuva, which indicates that there's a connection between Shabbos and Tshuva. And as this is also proven from what's taught in Paiskim, that Noyagim she'ein nar omer Haftarah Shuva Yisrael, that the minig is that even though in general we allow a boy under bar mitzvah to read the Haftarah, on Shabbos Shuva we don't allow a boy under bar mitzvah to read the Haftarah. And the reason for this is because we don't say this Haftarah of Shuva Yisrael on this Shabbos because of its connection to the Parsha that we read in the Torah, as most Haftarahs are. They're connected to the Parsha, but rather because the time is connected to Tshuva. So the reason Shuva Yisrael is read on this Shabbos is because it's during Aseret Tshuva, so therefore we have Haftarah that's connected to the time, not directly to the Parsha, just like we have Shabbos Chazayin and we have the Shabbos where we read the Haftarah about the Parshas and then the Shiva de Nechemta. And therefore it's understood that there is no place for a katan who is pater from the mitzvahs to say this Haftarah, which talks about the mitzvah of Tshuva. And according to this, we can say that the Shabbos is called Shabbos Shuva, not just because of the Haftarah, but rather also and actually mainly and primarily because of the content of the Shabbos, which is Tshuva. That because of this, we read this Haftarah that talks about Tshuva. So even according to the opinion that it's called Shabbos Shuva, the reason why it's called Shabbos Shuva is because of its connection to the content of the Haftarah, which is the idea of Tshuva, and that means that there's a connection between Shabbos and Tshuva. And so it comes out that also according to this opinion, the name Shabbos Shuva reflects the special connection of this Shabbos to Tshuva. And there's a question here, and that is, what's the special connection between this Shabbos, when we're talking about the aspect that it is Shabbos, to Tshuva? What's the connection really between Shabbos and this Shabbos, specifically to Tshuva? So in order to answer this question, we're going to go into another side discussion. So the explanation of all of this is as follows. The Alter Rebbe explains the teaching of Razal. This is in a Gemara. The Gemara over there basically asks that we see a contradiction between two psukim. One pasuk says, B'chol kareinu love, which indicates that Hashem is always available and always answers. Another pasuk says, it's only bihi matzei, dirshu Hashem bihi matzei, kra'u b'yesek karev. It's only when it's bihi matzei and b'yesek karev. And the Gemara answers that when it says B'chol Kareinu Elav, that's referring to a tzibur, and when it says B'himatzah and B'yesek Karev, that's referring to a yachid. And the Gemara then explains, when is Hashem indeed B'himatzah and B'yesek Karev to a yachid? That's during the Aseret Tshuva. So the Alter Rebbe explains the teaching of Razal of Ha B'yachid. This pasuk that says B'himatzah and B'yesek Karev, which is B'aseret Tshuva, is talking about B'yachid, by an individual, and this pasuk that says B'chol Kareinu Elav, that's talking about B'tzibur to a tzibur, and then it's Kol Hashana the whole year. So the Alter Rebbe explains it on a deeper level, that the tshuva of Aser Semei Tshuva comes from the level of Yachid, the Yechida in a person. Ha B'Aser Semei Tshuva, then the tshuva is B'Yachid, it comes from the level of Yechida. And the tshuva of the rest of the year comes from the level of Tzibur, which are the 10 Keiches HaPnimim. So Ha, the tshuva of Kol Hashana, that's B'Tzibur, that comes from the 10 Keiches HaPnimim of a person. And the Rebbe explains that these two types of tshuva fit with the two levels of tshuva, which are tshuva Tata and tshuva Ilah. Tshuva Tata, its idea is about fixing the avaynus of a person, fixing the averis that a person did. And tshuva Ilah is the idea of a ruach tashuv el elikim asher nasana, which is about the attachment of the neshama to its sherish and makar, to its source. Now the explanation in this idea is the general Aveda of Torah and mitzvahs. So now we're going to explain these two types of tshuva, tshuva tata and tshuva ilah, and why is tshuva tata connected to the 10 keiches pnimim, and tshuva ilah is connected to the level of yechida. So the general Aveda of Torah and mitzvahs is the connection of a person to Elokus that comes from one's keiches hapnimim. A person is using their 10 keiches hapnimim to serve Hashem and connect to Hashem. And when a person does an avera, so this creates that something is missing, and that there is a blemish in their connection of their keiches hapnimim to Hashem. And since on the level of the keiches hapnimim, a person became separate from Elokus, so therefore, in order to reconnect, so one has to awaken their etzem hanefesh, which is higher than the keiches hapnimim, where over there's no blemish and nothing is missing. And this is because an avera doesn't cause any weakness in the connection of one's etzem hanefesh Elokus, and therefore it's in its power of the etzem hanefesh to also reconnect the keiches hapnimim to Hashem, because it's on a level where it wasn't affected or impacted as a result of the avera. It's above being chas v'shalom, separate from Hashem, and so therefore when a person reaches that place within themselves, they can then reconnect also in their keiches hapnimim. However, since the whole being and the whole purpose of this tshuva is to fill the blemish and what's lacking in the keiches pnimim, so we must say that it's from a level in the nefesh that has a connection to the keiches pnimim. And also that what became missing through the averis takes up space on this level, because it relates to it. That's the whole existence and the whole being of this tshuva. It's about, and it's in response to a pagam and something which is missing and lacking in the keiches pnimim. That means that it relates to that level. Meaning that this tshuva, even though it comes from the etzem hanefesh, which is higher than the keiches hapnimim, and therefore over there's no blemish, and it could fill the blemish in the keiches hapnimim, but nevertheless it's from a level in the nefesh that's already nimshach, it's already drawn down to be a source to the keiches hapnimim, and it's not the actual etzem hanefesh. However, the level of yechida, which is the etzem hanefesh that is higher than being a source to the keiches hapnimim, that is completely higher from the whole idea of averis. It has no relationship to averis. It's not a response to what's occurring in the keiches hapnimim, and the tshuva on this level isn't for averis, but is rather the aliyah mechayil al chayil, like we said, v'aruch elikim v'aruch tashuv elikim asher nasana. It's just the aliyah mechayil al chayil of the attachment of the neshama to its source, and this is the greatness of the tshuva of Aser Semei Tshuva, tying it back to how the Alter Rebbe explains the Gemara. So this is the greatness of the tshuva of Aser Semei Tshuva over the tshuva of the whole year. That ha b'yachid, it's the aveda of tshuva ilah from the level of yechida. Now, similar to these two levels of tshuva ilah, which is biyachid, it's a level that's completely above the keiches pnimim. And tshuva tata, which is b'tzibur, it means that it connects to the keiches pnimim. So similar to these two levels are b'chlalis the two types of tshuva of the weekdays, of the Yemei Sachel, and of Shabbos. By the weekdays, the main avodah of a person is avodas habirurim through the lamates malachos, and the mundane tasks, which are in order, the whole purpose of them is to be mevar the mundane and elevate them to kedusha. So that's what the Yemei Sachel are. The main avodah is avodas habirurim, being engaged with the world, doing the lamates malachos and other mundane tasks over the chayil, which are all about being mevar the things that a person is engaged with, the mundane, and to elevate them to kedusha. And in Tshuva, this is similar to Tshuva Tata, which is the avodah of reconnecting one's koiches apnimim, which are separate from Elikus, Telikus. So it's a similar dynamic that we have the koiches apnimim that became separate from Hashem, and now reconnecting them. And also the avodas of Berurim is taking things that are outside the realm of Kedusha and bringing them into the realm of Kedusha. On Shabbos, however, Shabbos malacha is aser, because as a result of the aliyas ha'ilmus on Shabbos, a person is above worldly matters and avodas haberurim, and one's avodah is about rising higher within Kedusha itself. And when we look at that in Tshuva, the day of Shabbos is Tshuva Ilah, the rising and connection of the neshama to its source. It's not about elevating and bringing something outside of the realm of Kedusha into the realm of Kedusha, but rather it's about the neshama which is already connected to Hashem, rising higher and higher, which is the same idea, like we said, of Tshuva Ilah. According to this, we can now answer our question about what's the special connection between this Shabbos, considering the Shabbos aspect of it, to Tshuva. So with this, we can explain the greatness of the Tshuva of Shabbos Tshuva and the advantage that it has over the Tshuva of the other days of Aseret Yemei Tshuva. As was spoken many times, the 7 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim correspond to the 7 days of the week. That on each of these 7 days, we can do Tshuva for that day of the week of all the weeks of the year. So on Sunday, it's a tshuva of all the Sundays, on Monday for all the Mondays of the year, and so on and so forth. And according to this, it's understood that even though in general, all of the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, all of the days of Aseret Yemei Tshuva is Tshuva Ilah, but nevertheless, since the weekdays of Aseret Yemei Tshuva is about fixing the Avodah of the weekdays of the year, so from Sunday through Friday, it's about fixing the Sundays through Fridays of the whole year prior, so it's not the real and complete Avodah of Tshuva Ilah, because it relates to the Avodah of the weekdays, which is the idea, like we said in Tshuva, of Tshuva Tata. Whereas the day of Shabbos of the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, which is about fixing the Avodah of the days of Shabbos of the previous year, so it is the real and complete Avodah of Tshuva Ilah, because it's an Aseret Yemei Tshuva, and it relates to the days of Shabbos of the previous year, which Shabbos is connected to Tshuva Ilah. So it's the true and complete sense of Tshuva Ilah. And so that's the connection between Shabbos being called Shabbos Tshuva, because it has this deeper connection to the whole idea of Tshuva Ilah. According to all of this, we can now answer our 2 questions from the beginning of the Sicha, starting with answering the second question, which was, how is this Eirah to be Karev L'Shamayim connected to the Aseret Yemei Tshuva in general, and especially to Shabbos Tshuva, because that's very often the Shabbos when we read Parshas Haazinu. So according to this, we can explain the connection between the teaching in Sifri, that Moshe was Karev L'Shamayim, and Shabbos Tshuva. The 2 aspects of Shamayim and Aretz in the nefesh of a person are in general the koiches ha'pnimim and the etzem haneshama. The koiches ha'pnimim that come in a form of a slapshus in the body are the level of eretz in a person, and the etzem haneshama, which is the level of yichida that comes in the form of a makif in the body, is the level of shemayim in a person. So the koiches ha'pnimim is like the eretz, and the yichida, the etzem haneshama, is like shemayim, and therefore the 2 levels of tshuva, Tshuva Tata from the Koiches HaPnimim and Tshuva Ilah from Yechida, fit with the 2 levels of Eretz and Shemayim. Tshuva Tata is connected to Eretz because it's related to the Koiches HaPnimim, and Tshuva Ilah is connected to Shemayim because it comes from the Etzem HaNeshama, from the level of Yechida. And according to what we explained earlier, that the Tshuva of Aseret Yemei Tshuva in general, and specifically of Shabbos Tshuva, is the Avodah of Tshuva Ilah. So it's understood that during these days, a person should be Karev L'Shamayim, which is the Avodah of Tshuva Ilah. According to this, we could also answer our first question, which was, how is it in the ability of each and every Yid to be Karev L'Shamayim? According to this, it's understood how it's in the ability of every Yid to reach the level of Karev L'Shamayim. The explanation is, the basis for Tshuva Ilah, being the Avodah of the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, doesn't come from the person, but rather it comes from above. So it's not something that the person does, but rather it comes from above, from Hashem. Like the teaching of Razal on the Pasuk, Dirshu Hashem bihi matzei kra'u b'yesa karev. The Chazal tell us that Elu Asara Yamim Shebein Rosh Hashanah L'Yom Kippurim. These are the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So the closeness that exists in the Aseret Semei Tshuva is bihi matzai and bihi yesai karev. It's because Hashem is close. It doesn't come from the avodah of the person, but rather it comes from above. That in these days Hashem is karev, which what Chassidus says is called the kiruv hamar lanitzutz. The source is close to the spark, which causes that the nitzitz should be drawn to its source, the mar. So it's Hashem revealing Himself, which the response to that is that the neshamas are drawn to being awakened and come close to Hashem. So it's not something which comes from the person, but rather it's because bihi matzai and bihi yesei karev, it comes from Him, from Hashem. And therefore, even though throughout the year the avodah has to be in an organized and structured way, that first comes tshuva tata, and only afterwards comes tshuva ilah. Nevertheless, in the Aseret Semei Tshuva, there is an asinas koyach from above to each and every yid to be able to be karev l'shamayim, which is the avodah of tshuva ilah. So that answers the question: how is it in the ability of each and every yid to be karev l'shamayim? The answer is that it's not coming from the person, but rather it's coming from Hashem. It's bihi matzai, Hashem is found, and bihi yesei karev, Hashem is close. And the Rebbe adds and concludes that there is an added greatness when Shabbos Teshuva comes immediately after Rosh Hashanah. So when Rosh Hashanah is Thursday and Friday, and the first day of the Aseret Semei Teshuva is Shabbos Teshuva. And so then the week between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur starts with the day of Shabbos, because since Shabbos we say, "My name is Baruch and Kula Yemin," from it all days are Mizbarach. So it's a special sinas koyach that also the Aveda of the other days of Aseret Semei Teshuva should be on the level of Tshuva Ilah of the day of Shabbos, which, like we said, Shabbos has the idea of Tshuva Ilah in it. The Shabbos of Aseret Semei Teshuva has the idea of Tshuva Ilah in it more than the other days. And so when it's the first of the days of the Aseret Semei Teshuva, and it's mevarech all the days that follow it, so it gives a specialness in this koyach that they should also be on this level of Tshuva Ilah like the day of Shabbos.